Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks as always for joining me and being here. Your time is precious. Um, we're going to do a little bit, as the title suggests, we're going to do a little bit more on the vapor canopy. Um, Pretty popular subject, really blown up. Our Cakes has done a pretty good job covering this. And like I've mentioned before, it's been a widely discussed and requested subject. I hope you enjoyed the first part of this little series. I won't even call it a series, but um, yeah. So we're just going to cover um, few other people's opinions and loop it back around to Alaska and why that's such a big indicator. Siberia, the northern latitudes. Um, yeah. So again, thanks again for being here. Appreciate you all. We're going to jump right into these articles here, not waste any time. This one is from 1913, I believe. 1911, something like that. Food for thought. We're right here in the middle. Zoom in a little more so you can see. I have a few thoughts which I beg to offer if found worthy. We have in our little solar system at least two planets, which are surrounded and enveloped by vaporous rings or canopies. Why this? Briefly, because the body of each of these planets is now or has been at some past period of its existence in an igneous condition. Water is a product of fire, and that a ball of fire the size of Jupiter or Saturn should throw off water vapor into surrounding space, and that these vapors should assume the form first of rings and eventually of canopies, is only the result of an inexorable law. The fiery body of a planet, a Titan furnace. Now, remember this excerpt here because I think this week in my radium series continued, we're going to make some correlations here between the vapor canopy, volcanism, and radium. Vast and terrible beyond conception, and its vaporous envelope are concomitant conditions, and as a cause and effect must go together. And these vapors must of a necessity contain not only water, but also everything found within the body of the planet capable of liquefaction or disintegration by the continual action of such inconceivable heat, including iron, silver, gold, and all the metals. In obedience to the law of centrifugal force, they would take the form of rings about the planet's equator, thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of miles out in the field of space, the thinner and lighter vapors on the outside, the denser and heavier ones on the inside, while the remaining ones would be graduated between according to specific gravity, with perhaps a greater or less number of intermediate vacant space. The whole ring or system of rings being thousands of miles in thickness, this condition, from the nature of things, must continue millions of years. In the economy of nature, nothing is perishable, but all things are changeable. Matter may disappear from one place or condition only to assert itself somewhere else. Well, when these vapor rings begin to disappear from the skies, where are they going to? Like our own bodies to the earth from whence they came. In the lapse of years innumerable, everything combustible in this great furnace will have been consumed. The fire will have exhausted itself, and the cooling process will commence. What then? As the gigantic orb begins to cool off, its vapor rings begin to settle. The cooling of the orb is necessarily slow. The falling of its rings is slower. For all the while, the red hot orb is rotating on its axis, and the surrounding rings partake of the same motion. Hence, their downward motion is checked and they are held suspended in outer space for an incalculable length of time by the opposing force of centrifugal force. But the stupendous force which produced these vaporous rings and sent them on their upward march is removed, and now they commence their home return. Centrifugal force impedes their downward march, but the law of gravitation has a hold on them, and they must come back to Earth. Their return, however, must be done dec- decently and in order, and they must follow the route laid out by nature's laws. It is evident that the centrifugal force of a revolving planet is greatest at the equator, and it becomes gradually less as we reach the poles, where it is absolutely nothing. It is easy to be seen, then, that these equatorial vaporous rings would, in the course of their downward march, begin to spread, or flatten out, each way toward the poles, and so continue until they reach the planet's polar region, thus forming a vaporous envelope or canopy about its body. And now, and anon, these canopies, when the proper conditions obtain, fall to the surface of the planet, causing deluges. The heavier portions, metals, etc., being in larger proportion in the first downfalls and falling largely in the polar regions. Note the present gold discoveries in Alaska. We might as well state right here and that all planets, including Earth, have been, are now, or will in some time be in such condition as Jupiter is today. It is conceded that Earth was once in a molten condition, but just so much certainly as this is true, by just the same certainty it has had first its rings, then its canopies, and its cataclysmic downfalls, its deluges. So that's part one of the article. We're going to continue here to part two, and it's following along perfectly. So yeah, lots of connections here. We're going to connect it with the radium as well. It's going to be pretty interesting, I think. I think you guys, the radium series seems to be doing pretty well. And the connections here with the vapor canopy, I think, are very interesting. Part two. Where did the waters of the Nokian flood come from? I suppose some of my orthodox brethren of the 6 days theory will reply that God spake the word and it rained. I want to remark right here that I believe in God and trust in the merits of a risen Savior and have the deepest reverence for Holy Writ. But my understanding of some of its teachings may differ from that of my honored brethren. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Ah, yes. But who shall number the uncounted eons of time, that age covered by this brief declaration of the sacred historian? It was the only thing he could say on this point. The mysteries of the unfathomable past were as dark to him as they are to us, and more so. The evening and the morning were the first day. What kind of day was it? In all reason, and with profound reverence for the laws of nature, of God, who is the author, not one of the 24 hours. At the present time, we use the word day not only to denote the 24-hour day, but also with perfect freedom to denote an age or an indefinite time. If this is proper for us, why not accord the same liberty to the sacred writer? If we accept the marginal rendering, the word day is omitted altogether. The evening was and the morning was. Surely this first day was an indefinite time, and a very long one too, as may readily be seen when we contemplate the amount of business accomplished in it. And so, of the remaining days of the week, this, dear fellow passengers, is an, as I understand these things from my point of view, part of the digression. The waters of the Nokian flood were the last downfall of Earth's vaporous canopies, the final collapse of its former magnificent annular system. Why was the rainbow selected as a token that Jehovah would no more destroy the earth with a flood? It was once the most beautiful and most natural object that could be selected as a token or seal for such a covenant, because up to this time the rainbow had been impossible. From this time on, it was to be eternal fixture in the clouds. It requires sun rays and a vapor or water laden atmosphere to produce a rainbow. But up to Noah's flood, the sun had not shone directly upon the earth. The rays had been intercepted by the vapor canopy. The earth, with its teeming millions, had received only such portion of the sun's light and heat as passed through this canopy, an amount, however, amply sufficient for all purposes. The conditions which obtained in those days, there it goes again, should I say times, were more favorable to life and growth than are the present conditions. Now, again, This is echoing everything that we've been covering in all of my series pertaining to the tropical atmosphere, the um, flora and fauna, especially in the polar regions, that point directly to this exact same thing. Not to mention what the author was mentioning earlier with the minerals being deposited and being part of this vaporous canopy. Now, there were scientists who were hypothesizing that the birth of the sun was directly related to radium. And yeah, so stay tuned for the radium episode. It will be due out before the end of the week, and we'll get more into that. Um, An Earth enveloped by a vaporous canopy, permeated by the sun's light and heat, must have been a veritable greenhouse Earth, a real Garden of Eden, with a climate as warm and tropical as the poles as the equator. Now, you've heard me hypothesize this before as well, that the Garden of Eden and the proverbial naked in the garden, that the whole world was tropical, at least the northern latitudes, and of the same climate. There wasn't seasons as we know them, and everything was plentiful. And the Alaska episode of Anomalous America #1, again, the reason why I picked Alaska, because it's a kind of a great starting point, and why I was holding off on starting the Vapor Canopy series is I wanted to get a little farther into the radium work, but enough people had asked me, and I have plenty of material to kind of keep it going. So again, what this man is saying again, put aside your earth shape quarrels, and it's okay to disagree with him on certain things, but there's a lot of meat on the bones here. And a lot of what I've been showing strongly, strongly reinforces what this man is saying. And that this period was far closer to our timeline than we think or have been told, as far as the deluge and the Nokian concepts. Again, who was Noah? Very interesting concepts, and the story of the deluge exists in every major culture around the world. And the Lantean connections are very, very important as well. By the way, there is a long line of evidence that this was once the case. So he's talking about the warm tropical poles. Yes, and I've shown plenty of evidence. And this fact, once established, explains many hitherto inexplicable phenomenon. Under such earth conditions, everything in the animal and vegetable kingdom must have attained what we would now seem like enormous proportions. Again, probably one of my favorite subjects, and I've shown through every single episode of Anomalous America, not only petrified giant trees, petrified giant fruit and nuts, petrified giant animals. Yes, so the falling of this vapor canopy happened very quickly and would absolutely help explain, not only from a um, electrical principle, but also from a weather principle. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that in the next article we cover. So, again, like he said, under such earth conditions, everything in the animal and vegetable kingdom must have obtained what we would now seem like enormous proportions. Quote, there were giants in those days. The sun, while a life giver, is also a life destroyer. And it so appears that the historic man was witness to the last downfall of the Earth's annular system. Now, again, if you study cultures far enough back, the sun worship is a new thing. The appearance of the moon and the sun are, relatively speaking, new phenomena. And the annular system is a very interesting subject when we think about those two things put together and time frames we're discussing, the flood, etc. To the final breaking up of the last canopy when the windows of heaven were opened and the floods came. As to the number and magnitude of the prehistoric cataclysms, the world will never know. Only this, from the waymarks and the nature of things, there must have been many. Each succeeding one, with its after effects, tended to bring the earth more and more into a fit condition for the habitation of man. Now, again, we've been showing Kind of the Atlantean narrative makes more sense in this system as well, because not only are we talking about giant flora and fauna, but also giant mammalian and reptiles. And like we're showing with these giants, they weren't necessarily warring with men. That came later. That came after the fall of the Vapor Canopy. I believe that many of these ancient buried cities that we've been showing throughout anomalous America that are huge and gigantic, and they were full with men as tall as 8 to 10 feet, they were warring with giant creatures. From one downfall to another may have been a period many times longer from Adam's day to ours, and it may not be possible. So yeah, if you follow the again, whether or not you take the chronology or the genetical markers of the Bible seriously, Adam was a giant, possibly 100 feet tall, which is interesting. And he may have been there when the vapor canopy was at its strongest, oxygen levels at their highest. Same with the trees and the animals. Yes, it is not plausible that during the latter of these interdiluvian periods, the Earth may have come into condition to support and did support animal life, and perhaps man very much, if not just as he exists to this day. But I have spun this out as much greater length than I intended. It is a subject upon which volumes might be, yes, and have been written. Allow me to submit to the candid, thoughtful member of our crew, if this annular theory of manufacturing worlds is not more in the line of reason and law than the literal 6-day theory, we would not in the least question Jehovah's power to create a world and the people in it and equip it with all the necessaries and luxuries incident to human life in 24 hours. Did he only choose to do it in that way? But all the evidence, as I understand it, points to the annular process. The most that can be said as to the lapse of time between the successive stages of this annular process is that it was simply immense, prodigious, and if these various ages or parts, known to be so vast, are yet indeterminable as to number and duration, what shall we say on the grand whole which makes up the age of the world? We are bewildered in the mazes of God's great workshop. Amazing. Um, yeah, so lots of great connections here, as I've been saying throughout. And thanks for sticking with me through my own kind of opinion inserts here. And we're going to hop into um, one more article for this episode. I mentioned it in the previous episode. It's going to kind of touch on um, what I had already talked about with the animals in the ice and what they were learning from the animals in the ice. So we're right here, mammoths and glaciers. Um, yeah, scientific theories accounting for the presence of huge bodies in the northern ice fields. A long study of the conditions which produced the sudden freezing up of mammoths and other animals in the Arctic regions has satisfied me that it was caused by the falling of a watery canopy or ring such as now seen above the poles of Jupiter, writes Isaac and Vale, geologist in the New York World. The remarkable discovery by Dr. Herz of the body of a huge mammoth in a bed of glacier ice in eastern Siberia has again revived among scientific thinkers the discussion of the manifest changes the earth has undergone since the mammoth quadrupeds fed in lands of abounding pastures where snow and ice have held sway for thousands of years. So yeah, we've been showing again in Anomalous America, not to be a broken record, but we've been showing this endlessly. Man and animal alongside one another, and man being of a much larger stature than of today. Same with the animal. A mammoth locked in glacier ice has seemed to be an enigma difficult to solve. And in this case, we have one peculiarly, I apologize for my inability to read today. I bit my tongue, and it's not helping anything. Hard to solve is linked to existing causes, and all manner of suggestions, wise and otherwise, have been put forth to aid in the longed for solution. As far back as the summer of 1790, a mammoth was found by Dr. Adams frozen in a glacier of clear ice, which abutted against the beach at the mouth of the Lena River in northern Siberia. The skeleton of this animal, I believe, is mounted in the Museum of St. Petersburg. It was so well preserved in the matrix ice that Cuvier, after close review of the accompanying conditions, declared that the animal was suddenly killed and immediately buried in a frosty grave, and that it had remained in that condition from the day it was overtaken by some sudden catastrophe. Since that time, many of these animals have been found in the Arctic world. It seems that a theory is needed to account for a warm climate, affording provender all the over the Arctic world, where once the mammoth luxuriated, and which continued warm for a vast length of time to afford such hordes of mammals to breed and occupy that region. This makes me think of some of the older maps from the 1500s that show the poles being densely populated, especially Antarctica. Then, too, the same theory must account for a sudden desolating fall of snow upon a land of abounding life. There is such a theory being advocated by some, which seems in a very satisfactory way to account for both of these North World conditions. I will present it as I understand it. The annular theory asks us to believe that some of the Earth's primitive watery vapors lingered about the planet till a very late in geological times, even down to the advent of man. Again, I strongly support this theory with many of the geological and zoological references that I've made to this. They're endless, thousands and thousands of them. And I've been referencing dozens, if not hundreds, especially on Twitter. I've been on there 12 years now. And I know the YouTube thing's new, and many of you are new to my work, but let me tell you, it's thousands of proofs, maybe not proofs, but very strong support of this annular system being a reality. These vapors, it is supposed, revolved about the Earth as a world canopy, just as similar vapors revolve about the planets of Jupiter and Saturn today. Such a canopy, it is claimed, would be competent to modify the climate of the whole Earth, even causing a temperate climate about the poles, and ample pasturage for the mammoth and his congeners. Now, astronomers say that Jupiter is at times dropping portions of its canopy or watery vapor at its poles. If this be true, and if law presides universally in the evolution of worlds, we are asked to admit that Earth's canopy of lingering vapors, competent during its existence to make a warm climate, was also competent in its fall in the polar region to desolate a land of exuberant life. This is exactly what happened. Happened in an instant. Certainly, we can place in it, and there were several events for sure. Certainly, we can place no Mets and bounds. Sorry, I'm not sure what that says there. Mets and bounds to such avalanches of world snow, nor can we put any estimate upon their suddenness. Such snowfalls may have covered polar pastures and their feeding hordes hundreds of feet deep in a single day or in an hour. Absolutely. There seems to be nothing unnatural or improbable in this canopy theory, and through it, we escape the alternative of making the earth cold in order to cover it with snows. Again, this supports a lot of the older maps as well, and the stories of Atlantis, Mount Meru, all of these things. For here we cover it with snows to make it cold, just as Tyndall demanded a quarter of a century ago. Then, too, if this theory be true, we have all competent cause for all the glacier epochs and all the deluges the earth ever saw. Again, the Enochian, Noachian, Noah, Enoch, Janus overlays are really important here. The story of the fall of the giant trees from the um, Enoch stories relate directly, I think, to this annular system, the fall of the vapor canopy, Noah's flood. I've posted a lot about who Noah was. and the symbology of the rainbow. And it makes the most sense with this annular system and the fall of the vapor canopy. If some of the primitive vapors lingered about the earth till the mammoth died, then some of them have fallen in grand installments through all the ages. In fact, the ages may have been more or less modified and regulated by them. I agree with this completely. The trees show this, the animals show this, and the humans show this. We're going from skeletal records of humans in the 20s, 20 feet tall, even taller. And again, shout out my good friend Stellium. You know, his Titan series on the giant mammoth mountain that he lives right next to supports this theory. I think that we were dealing with a very, very high dense oxygen atmosphere, tropical. We'd lose a layer. It'd cause a flood. Everything would shrink. The next round would happen, another flood. So it was layer upon layer upon layer. And then the last vapor canopy that fell, thus the appearance of the sun and the moon and the worship of such. And the ages began, the modern age as we know it, and the story of Noah and the symbol of the rainbow as we know it as well signifies this, and the kickoff of sun worship and the fall of, Eden. The serpent, was the serpent lightning plasma that began to break out as the sun was then exposed to a different vapor, and perhaps the rich atmospheric condition mixed with the humidity in the sun created a extreme plasma event. I'd say that that was very likely too, as the petrifactions show very much that this flood and went hand in hand with a great petrifaction on a worldwide scale, as well as a volcanic um, conflagration, perhaps in different stages, but related to one another. Where was I? So then some of them have fallen in grand installments. Yes, all the ages. In fact, the ages may have been more or less modified and regulated by them. Like I was saying, yes, I agree with that completely. And the geologists may find the canopies impress all through the past, from Mona to man. So yeah, lots of really good juice there. Um, for those who haven't touched on the vapor canopy stuff, it's kind of a good middle ground, not quite introductory, not quite fully advanced. For those that kind of got what they requested for me, shared some of my information that already are familiar with Archaic's work, then hopefully you found some nuggets in this, and you enjoyed this as well. And yeah, so I have a few more. I'm not quite sure how to work into everything, but let me know in the comments if you want me to do do a few more installments on this subject matter, and I'm happy to do so. Um, but also make sure to look out for my next radium episode. We're going to talk about the appearance of the sun, how that could have been triggered by the birth of the sun, and that the fall of this last canopy could have been a triggered event, and the sun may have been birthed. We're going to talk about radium and the stars and the galaxies and stuff like that. And I'll make some overlaps between this work and the radium series with volcanism and the sun worship and Ra and all these things, and 88. And yeah, thanks again for being here. I hope you enjoyed this material. Let me know in the comments what you thought. And I hope to see you in the next radium episode, hopefully tomorrow, but before the end of the week for sure. And for those that have been asking, Anomalous America Mississippi episode is complete and just waiting for the right time for me to film. I film Anomalous America live. I prefer it that way. And that's been very hard to do. Um, yeah, we're got a lot going on as a family, and filming live is not in the cards right now. So I'm hoping to get that done by next week, but we'll see. So appreciate you guys. Your time is precious. Thanks again. Have a great day.